listening to Island Minds, the mental health podcast. Please note, these episodes deal with topics that some listeners may find distressing. For suggested contacts, please see the show notes on our Facebook page after this episode.
And welcome back to Island Minds. This is episode 2 of series 2, and I am never going to get tired of saying series 1, series 2, series 3, 4, 5, 6.
I mean, my brain just imploded at the idea of 6, but only because I hate change.
Yes, me too. I've had a thought. So by the time this episode airs here, we're going to be very different people.
Oh.
Because volume 2 of Stranger Things would have happened.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
So this is a recording to myself to remind myself it's going to be okay.
I swear to God, if Steve dies.
It's going to be Steve, Eddie or Murray. Like, it's going to be one of them or all of them.
I actually said to Mark, who's our upcoming guest this episode, and I will get back to that, but I said to him, I almost want the show to be cancelled just so that none of the characters die. Like, that's how much I love all the characters. Although, obviously, no, I don't. But
no. Well, the Duffer brothers have said it's going to be a punch in the heart. So,
Yep.
Steve's dead.
Oh, God, someone's going to die. Yeah.
They need to form a protective ring around Eddie immediately. So yeah, sorry, we digressed. My fault. Although it is in keeping with our guest, I guess.
We know what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Yeah. So how are you, Tia?
Yeah, pretty good, thank you.
Good.
Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, much of the same. Yeah. So series 2. So I feel like we learned a lot in series 1, not just about different people's experiences, but I felt like we learned a lot as well. I feel like we're going to learn a lot as well going forward. But I think one of the things we discovered during series 1 was the importance of language and how language can have a profound effect either positively or negatively. And interestingly, very recently on Twitter, I saw a post that referred to certain mental illnesses as fashionable. Now, what they meant was that some are more socially acceptable than others, but what they wrote was they were more fashionable, which is obviously quite a dangerous use of the word and really gives it the wrong implication. So it's just interesting to me how language is used and how it can affect the way we talk about mental health, because they have a good point. And I know we're going to cover this in greater detail in a later episode, but it does give you sort of food for thought that we generally tend to accept anxiety, depression, to a degree OCD as mental illnesses that we know about, they exist, and that's okay. But I feel like things like borderline personality disorder or psychosis, people seem to accept them less. They don't seem to be as socially acceptable. So just a really interesting thought on language.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And like Becky said in our last episode, when she thought she was going to be diagnosed with schizophrenia, she was so worried because of the stigma, because she said people think of it as like the mad axe murderer illness, which is really sad. But yeah, there does seem to be, a divide of, those more, in quotes, acceptable illnesses. And language is so important, even the language of, and I know we've spoken about this before, but the language of conditions as well. Borderline personality disorder is one of the big ones that's, again, quotation marks, perhaps not as acceptable, but that's also called EUPD, emotionally unstable personality disorder. And there's so much to learn and keep learning and reflect on in terms of language and how we approach that.
Yeah, and it's fair to say we might get it wrong sometimes as we're still learning, but we will always, if we've ever said something that isn't quite right, we'll always try to do better next time. We'll always listen to feedback and things like that. Something I've very recently become conscious of on Twitter is, in terms of language, is the phrase, it's okay to not be okay. While it has good intentions, it actually can be quite problematic to some people. Now, I think it's just a bit of it's semantics. It does have good intentions, but we would actually like to hear from our listeners. So we'd like to know how you feel about the phrase, it's okay to not be okay, because there does seem to be a bit of a divide online. Some people accept that it's saying actually your feelings are valid and it is absolutely okay to not be okay all the time, but other people don't like it because it's saying it's okay to feel like crap, and actually it's not okay to feel like crap. No one should have to feel like crap, but I think it's how the phrase is used, and I'm not sure how I feel about the debate, but yeah, it's just interesting. I don't know how you feel.
It is so interesting, and when you initially told me, I had that gut reaction of like being defensive because this phrase meant so much to me, and then when I reflected and spoke to people about it, I thought, actually I can completely see why this would be damaging. I think we are going to have a really great discussion about this in a later episode, which is exactly why we'd love your thoughts, because we would love to discuss it, and that's all well and good, but we want to hear from other people. We want to, we're not the authority on anything, basically. Yeah, we want to know what people think and make sure we give it a fair discussion rather than just our opinions on it.
Yeah, so we would love to hear from you. So if you have any thoughts on the phrase, it's okay to not be okay, whether you're for it, against it, or just have some observations on it, please do get in touch with us. You can email us or you can contact us via any of our social media pages, so Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So yeah, please do let us know, and then we will have a discussion about that at a later date.
Yes, just to say, our email is in our show notes, I believe, or on our page.
Yes, it is in all those things.
Okay, all of the above. Excellent. Very cool. Well, that was succinct.
That was, wasn't it? That's
gone well.
That's gone well. So this episode, Tia.
Yes, so I interviewed my friend Mark, who has his own podcast called Creative Psychopaths that I've guested on a couple of times and will continue to guest on, which is great fun. It's a horror movie podcast. I am plugging it now because I very rudely forgot to ask Mark if he had anything to plug, even though I'd said I would. So yeah, please check out his podcast. It's amazing, as is he. And you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and he's on all social media. He also has a Discord group. But yeah, go check it out. I also forgot to thank him for his interview, which is, very rude. I mean, I thanked him like when we'd stopped recording, and in messages later. But yeah, in the interview, it just sounds very abrupt at the end. So thank you, Mark. You did a wonderful job, and I really appreciated you talking to me. And I'm sure it's going to help people to hear about your experiences. Mark talks about his history of living with depression, men's mental health. He also talks about binge eating disorder, which is really interesting. I didn't know much about it. I just wanted to say, just quickly, there is a point where we're discussing suicide, and I talk about it being good to normalise the conversations, because unfortunately sometimes in services it can be a bit of, red alert, send the cavalry when someone even says the word. And while I do believe we need to normalise that, and I do think that needs to change, I also completely appreciate, especially as someone who works in services, that services do that for a reason, and they have to make sure they're taking care of people and doing everything they can in their power to look out for people. So I just wanted to say that wasn't me saying they're getting that wrong. But yeah, he, as I said, there's lots he discussed. I know you have some statistics, Hannah, around some of those issues.
Yeah, binge eating disorder does come under the eating disorder umbrella, but I feel like it is quite not an unknown one. People have heard of it, but I feel like people brush that off slightly more so than they do other eating disorders, and I think it's very stigmatized. So it's been really interesting listening. I know we've been through some of these statistics in previous episodes, but I just think it's really important that people really understand the seriousness of eating disorders, because eating disorders are responsible for more loss of life than any other mental illness. And the sad fact is, they're not getting any less. If anything, they're actually becoming more and more common. And just a couple of statistics so I got these from Priory, just for reference. So between 1 and 3.4 million people in the UK are affected by eating disorders, and around 25% of those affected by an eating disorder are male. So yeah, and most eating disorders will develop during adolescence, although there are cases of eating disorders developing in children as young as 6. So yeah, it is a serious thing. And I feel like eating disorders are, we say this, I think, about everything we talk about, still highly stigmatized. There was a documentary on a couple of months ago that highlighted Nikki Graham's journey with anorexia. I highly recommend it as a watch, because it was very interesting. I mean, it's quite upsetting, but it really did highlight the reality of living with an eating disorder. Obviously that covered anorexia, which is probably the most well-known eating disorder. It's not that I forget, but every time I come back to the statistic that it has highest mortality rate of mental illnesses, I'm always shocked.
Yeah.
When I reread that, every time, even though I know that, and we talked about it so often, every time I am shocked.
Yeah, it is. And I found it's interesting you said binge eating disorder, sort of less known, and I felt the same, because I'd come across the term, but I didn't really know much about it. But Mark was saying that it's actually one of the more common of the eating disorders. And actually, when I was looking at statistics, I found that over 1 million people in the UK with binge eating disorder. It is actually quite common, and
just not. Yeah. I feel like it's not talked about a lot, and I wonder if there is almost are people embarrassed to talk about it? Is it the stigma that's stopping people talking about it?
Yeah. And I think that, interestingly, I think part of that comes back to language, because I think we've trivialized the word binge. Yes. Not only in terms of binging TV, things like that, but when we talk about binging food, I mean, I've been guilty of saying it, I would binge eat, but it's not, when you really look at what that is, it's not the same thing at all.
No. So the NHS describe it as binge eating disorder involves regularly eating a lot of food over a short period of time until you're uncomfortably full. Binges are often planned in advance, usually done alone, and may include special binge foods, which you may feel guilty or ashamed after eating. Men and women of any age can get binge eating disorder, but it does usually start in late teens or early 20s. So that's direct from the NHS website.
Yeah. I was just going to say, talking about being shocked by statistics, I was looking at general men's mental health statistics, and even though I've read these before, I'm always shocked. 3 times as many men die by suicide as women. Men aged 40 to 49 have the highest rates of suicide in the UK. Men are also less likely to access psychological therapies. Only 36% of NHS referrals to talking therapies are from men.
Even a sort of a small example, this podcast, we always have an outpouring of women that are happy to talk to us, but it can be slightly harder to find men that are comfortable talking about their mental health. For the men that have come on to our podcast, thank you for hopefully inspiring others to do the same.
Yeah. And they've all all of our guests have been amazing. All of the men have been amazing. I was just gonna say, like, I was really proud of Mark for coming on, because he talks about being from a generation where men are stoic and don't talk about these things. So I know it can't have been easy for him. But it is a really great interview. Thank you, Mark.
Hey guys, this is your friendly neighbourhood co-host Tia, very nicely, and let's be honest, very awkwardly, asking if you could please rate and review where possible. You can like and share our social media pages or leave us ratings on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's very quick and easy and we really appreciate it, and we'd love to hear your feedback. I mean, preferably good feedback, because we do have anxiety, but, whatever you feel like. Thank you. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. I say us, it's just me. We are Hannah-less, but thank you for joining me.
You're welcome,
Yeah.
I think.
How does it feel to be on that side of the microphone?
Oh, on the interviewee side. Yeah, it's fine, I think. I don't know. I want the control. Give me the control.
So, can you tell me a bit about your mental health journey? And I know you wanted to speak particularly about living with depression.
Yeah. So, I started realizing after I lost a job that I didn't think I loved it at the time, but because the job that I was in was sort of shut down through necessity, like I didn't want to leave. And I sort of realized that I was feeling, not myself, but I couldn't put a finger on it. And it was probably even years after where I realized that I was starting to lose who I was. And I can't remember the particular reason I actually went to the doctors at the time, and it wasn't for it, but I did mention to them that I'd been feeling, like low and not great.
Yeah.
This word depression came up. Now, a lot of people, well, I don't know, even yourself, like when you first hear it, if you don't know anything about depression, it just puts you think, oh, I'm just sad. I just feel sad.
Yeah.
It doesn't equate to an illness. It equates to being sad.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least, that was how I had it at first. But again, I mentioned it to my wife, the doctor says I've got depression. But again, between the two of you, go, well, what does that mean? I don't know. I feel like crap.
Yeah.
But again, I probably let that run on even longer, to the point of, not wanting to be here anymore, basically. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, and I don't know what it is. I don't know why there's this sort of feeling of not wanting to get help. But eventually, I went to see a doctor again.
Yeah.
And remember sort of explaining this to them, and they sort of, they put me on medication, but
yeah,
I remember crying a lot in the doctor's thing, because and it's going to sound weird, but I was so happy that they believed me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
That doesn't sound weird at all. Totally get what you mean.
Yeah, and it was like, and then of course, I find myself entirely interested if I've got an illness, which is weird. I find myself entirely interested. So I did my research. I found out what my medication was doing to my brain, and what I could do for my mental health. But the thing is, and I think anyone with mental health will tell you, it's easy to take it on board, and it's really easy to dish it out as advice. Yeah. But actually doing any of the things that are going to help you is very, very tricky.
Yeah.
Really difficult. It's like you're saying, oh well, yeah, I could go out and exercise, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
And
depression particularly it's so hard to get out of it and to do anything that would actually help. And sometimes nothing helps and you just have to get through it. And that's like such an awful thing to think, but sometimes it's just kind of how it is.
It is, yeah. And I think for a long time I let it define me as well.
Yeah.
I let myself become my depression, and that was all I was. In my head, that's all I was. I was just this dark cloud of nothing but just trudging through the world, and that's how I felt. And obviously, and it's hard for people around you to understand what you're going through, especially if someone's never had to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
They can't have a frame of reference for it, and they don't. And I don't blame them for that, because obviously I had many years where I wasn't depressed, and I would have been exactly the same as people are to me, where I'd be like, oh, go on, just cheer up.
Yeah.
Turn your frown upside down. It's like, yeah, if I could, I would do. But, it took every ounce of energy I got this morning to get out of my bed.
Yeah. And that is, it's something you might hear a lot of. Those who have been through it will hear a lot, but getting out of bed is a massive victory when you're depressed.
Yeah. And I think, to a degree, over time, I've been able to give myself those victories as well.
Yeah.
I think if you can give yourself the small victories, if you, even if I woke up that morning not happy enough that I woke up, not annoyed that I didn't wake up, it's just a small victory, and you've got to take them as they come.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know that I can explain how it makes me feel, and I think I have done a bit. But further to that, I ended up trying every single antidepressant under the sun, including, and I can't remember the name of it, and I don't think we need to know, but there's one that specifically makes you crave carbs.
Oh, wow.
I took that one on. That was actually the only one that made me feel better mentally.
Yeah.
But it did specifically, I just wanted to eat all the time. So I just stopped taking antidepressants dead. And I hadn't taken them until very, very recently. But there's more to my journey than that, which is that eventually over time I got diagnosed with an eating disorder that I didn't realize was an eating disorder.
Okay.
Which was it's called Binge Eating Disorder, or BED.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really hard to explain. And I think if someone might understand what bulimia is, which is a binge and a purge, whereas binge eating disorder is literally a binge.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does come with a purge, because I can. It's something that I'm still fighting now, and I wish I could get a handle on it, but I'm finding it tricky. But anyway, the binge eating disorder was a huge step forward for me, because my weight's always been a problem and it's always got me down.
Yeah.
But to sit down with someone, it was the mental health team, and sat down, and over a few weeks they were like you've got this, basically. So it's like, and I don't even know how to explain it, because it's basically is an uncontrollable need to eat.
Yeah.
And it is like it basically eating your feelings to the sometimes when I'm not hungry, sometimes over the top portions, things like that. And I found that really difficult, because it's so hard to explain to someone. I think, like I said, with depression, and I've got a little bit of anxiety, but not quite as much. I think while it is hard to explain, it's easier for people to get a grip on that. But whereas with the binge eating thing, it's a case that a lot of people think, well, just don't eat.
Yeah. Or just eat in moderation, like it's not an actual disorder that you can
just eat in moderation. Yeah. And I've really struggled with it And I lost a lot of weight recently because I ended up going to Slimming World.
Yeah.
Well, I know I say I lost it recently. I lost it and put it back on because reflecting on it now, and I've been going back to the doctors recently, Slimming World is, while it is a good thing, I really think it is, I was swapping one binge for another.
Right.
Because they offer what you call free foods.
Yeah.
So these are the foods where they go, look, you can eat as much of this food as you want and you will lose weight. And you do lose weight. But my brain didn't do it. I didn't take it in as a new healthy lifestyle. I just sort of, I don't know how to explain it. My brain just went, well, we just swapped one binge for another here.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it at the time. My wife actually did. She said to me, you're eating too much food, because I'd have all this free food and I'd have like a huge bowl's worth of food. She's like, that's far too much food. I'm like, well, it's all free.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like I say, I like an advocate for it. I think a lot of people, get a lot out of it. But I think on reflection, if you've got something like binge eating disorder, it's not helpful because it, like I say, it allows you to continue disordered eating.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so odd. I remember when they called it disordered eating and not an eating disorder, it makes more sense when they say it like that, they'd be like, well, if you're eating more food than your body needs, then it's disordered eating. It's not eating the way that you should be eating. So, and apparently it is like more common than actually any of the other eating disorders, and yet not as well known about.
No.
Because, like I say, it doesn't come with any of the, what you might call, well, like I say, the purges or the not eating. It doesn't, but it still destroys your body.
Yeah, and your mental health.
Yeah, it's just a strange thing, and I think, I'm a child of the 80s, so there's easily probably reasons for my past that I eat my feelings, but we weren't exactly the healthy living people that we get today. But yeah, anyway, so I've come off the Slimming World journey, and I just started putting on weight again. And the more weight I put on, the unhappier I got, to the point where I was like, I'm going to have to go back to the doctors here because, again, I'm feeling super low. And, I've always anchored myself to my children. Like, I've always thought at least they keep me here. I don't, but I could feel that anchor becoming less and less. Like I say, I had to go back to the doctor. Basically, I knew I did, and I felt like I had to. So yeah, I went back, and now I am on antidepressants, the original ones that I originally took, and they actually do seem to have made a big difference.
Yeah.
The only thing is, I have had a few like small side effects from them. I think they are affecting my sleep. I think that's something. They're affecting my sleep, and I started grinding my teeth.
Oh, right. Yeah. The side effects of antidepressants are weird. Like things you don't even think about. But it's amazing that you'll find they are helping, because it is. It's like what's the phrase I'm looking for? Just blind search in the dark, basically, for finding ones that suit you, and wait it out a few weeks to see if they do. But they can be amazing.
Yeah. I get the feeling what happened originally was I was more eager to get more like higher doses into me.
Yeah.
And I'm on the lowest dose, and I thought these are all right. So discussing with my doctor, because they kind of wanted me to go up a dose, and I'm like, I actually feel fine. So I don't think we'll bother doing that.
Yeah.
As you well know, I started my own podcast, and that's actually been.
Oh, have you? I've not. I don't know.
That's actually been really great for me because
Hmm.
I've never had a hobby I really enjoyed doing, but it turns out I'm quite good at editing, or at least I think I am. And so I enjoy doing that, and it keeps me busy.
Yeah.
And I've had this dipping back into my mental health journey. And I say I haven't had much anxiety. I've actually suffered quite badly with social anxiety.
Yeah.
And I've lost a lot of friendships through my own fault because I don't keep in contact with people because I'm actually really quite good at texting people, like talking over text and stuff like that. But if I get in the flesh,
that's your horror talk coming through.
No, but if I was in a pub or something like that, whatever happens, my brain just clams up.
Yeah.
And I'm not myself anymore. Whereas I found with this, I'm comfortable on Zoom because, we're not in the same room.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to say, you're in your safe space.
Yeah.
My home's a big safe space for me. And I found actually I'm a bit worse since COVID, and not the, fear of germs element, but the just, oh God, I'm not used to being around people as much. And I didn't realize how much it affected me, but I've been struggling.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah. That destroyed a lot of people, didn't it? The old COVID thing.
Yeah.
But then we sort of came out of that, and then, or it felt like we were coming out of that, and then suddenly there's a war going on in the world, and
I have to say, like, I have dark humor, but the amount of like memes, just like, what is happening? Like, what are we living through? It feels like we're in the backstory of like some hero's adventure later on. He's like, back when the apocalypse and the war happened. Yeah, feels like we're in that stage.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll. It's hard in terms of that because it's obviously piled on top of you, and then especially if you're dealing with degrees of mental health where people don't often realize that, and I don't know if it is hand in hand, but everybody I know who's got a depression or anxiety overthinks absolutely every single thing to the point of, scenarios that won't even never happen.
Yeah.
To the point of believing them outright that it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah. I was going to talk about, I know one of the big things you want to talk about was men's mental health in general. And I know you said to me, you've found it hard to talk to people about your mental health or for people to understand aspects of it. And do you think that's part of a wider problem with men's mental health specifically?
It is with men's mental health because I wish number one, I wish I could do more for men's mental health, and I'm sure I could if I've tried really hard. What I've discovered is with a lot of my friends, and some of my friends have mental health issues, and I can talk to them fine, but for the ones that don't, that's where you specifically get those people who will just tell you to cheer up, or or a complete disinterest in that. It's not something that it's not something I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And I know I've tried. I'm not overly clever in these things, but I've tried my best to sort of study it a little bit. And I know there is a degree of actual like nature to it. Like men have got this sort of alpha male quality. A lot of them do, and nobody wants to show any kind of weakness.
Yeah.
I think things have got better even in the past couple of years. And I think also COVID that might be the one thing that it helped with, is that a lot more men came out, talking to their friends about this thing that's affecting them.
Yeah.
No. So I don't know. I feel like it's a subject I could say a lot about, and yet now I find myself.
That's okay. I think so much of it is just societal roles. It's still, it's obviously getting better and better, but Hannah and I spoke about paternity and the way men's roles are around pregnancy and having children. Like, that's still so backwards. And often, like, when we talk about that, we think about it being backwards for the woman, but actually it's still really backwards for the men, and still having like that brief paternity, and then it's like you go back to work, you're the caregiver, you're the provider, you're the strong one. And I think all of that is still very toxic. And it is, it's getting better, but it's still a massive problem.
Yeah, I think there's there is obviously, I think the word is postpartum depression for women.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone considers the depression potentially that men get from it.
Mm-hmm.
Because of, I don't know, the way that it is. And I don't know. I get the feeling that a lot of men like the idea of being, the caregiver and things like that. But when there's only two of you, you're the starring role of that. But when there's three of you, you become a bit of a bit part player.
Yeah.
I very rarely hear anybody talk about that. How having babies affects men. And sometimes the way that men get treated as fathers, the words used so often are crueler than you think. And it isn't, it's going to sound stupid, but I don't want to be compared to the babysitter.
Yeah, no, it's not stupid at all. Hannah and I spoke about this. She was
I think I remember you saying,
yeah. Someone said, "Is Jack going to babysit?" And she's like, "What do you mean? He's her dad. He's going to look after her the same way I would."
Yeah.
What a bizarre thing to say.
But it happens so often. It happens so often. It's like, oh, is dad babysitting tonight? It's like, well, no, I'm just looking after the kids the way I normally would.
Yeah, like you're doing it for a hobby, and you might just jump in every now and then. But
it adds a little bit to what I was saying about you lose your. I don't know any other way to put it, but you lose your sort of starring role.
Yeah.
You suddenly you're not even 50% of the parents. You're the babysitter.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is, don't get me wrong, a lot of that is the women do go through, the hell of being pregnant and giving birth, and there is a whole lot to that, but like I say, having babies and children, I think it doesn't get talked about enough for men.
No. And it's, talking about it more doesn't mean diminishing the struggles of the women or invalidating them. Like, perhaps we can support them both. We support everyone.
Yeah.
And surely that's the best way to look after the child as well, like giving both parents support, right?
Well, you'd think so.
Just think society's still so backwards for those roles. It's a real shame.
Yeah, it is. Like I say, the thing with men's mental health is a lot of us, and it's less likely for the new generations now, but a lot of us from my generation, it's a sort of stoic, men don't do these things. We don't talk to each other about our feelings. We don't embrace our feelings. You bottle them up. You can be angry if you want to, or you can shout and things like that, but don't show any kind of weakness. But it's totally like trying to escape the idea of it being weakness.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think the moment you realize that you've got a mental health issue, and then you look at it and you go, oh, you know what? I'm ill.
Yeah.
I'm ill. And, if people say this all the time, but if you broke your leg, you deal with it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to mental health, so many people are dealing with it on their own.
Yeah.
And I don't hate to say it because it's just true fact, but unfortunately, I've known a couple of people recently who haven't reached out and, took their own life.
Yeah.
And like I say, these are men that I knew, and I just feel it just feels awful to know that. I guess you assume things, but I just assume that they just couldn't reach out to anyone.
Yeah.
They just dealt with it on their own. And what you hear so often is that when that happens, people always say, "Oh, they were so happy, and I never knew anything about that."
Yeah.
And I don't know what you think, but sometimes the mask of being okay is the most tiring thing you can possibly do. The mask of being okay is I think sometimes that's what will drag you down by the end of the day. That's what leaves you at the end of the day feeling like so tired.
Yeah.
And then the next day you wake up and you're going to have to put that mask on again.
Yeah.
And then the days when you're not wearing your mask because you can't, everybody wants a piece of you that day. What's wrong with you? Why are you not happy today?
Yeah.
Stop being so miserable. It's like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. I'm doing as much as I can.
I made a relatively small mistake at work today, and I had a complete meltdown to my supervisor because I've just had a mask on for weeks, and I do it to myself. I'm just like, yeah, I'm fine. I said to Matt earlier, actually, I was like, I'm like a shark. I just got to keep moving. It's fine. So I don't feel it. It's fine. And then it always catches up.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But it is exhausting.
Yeah. I think my thing is I do. No, I don't know why I was going to say to you that I don't break down, but I do. I don't know why I was going to say that I don't, but I do. Yeah. And it does the same as what you just said. It becomes suddenly very overwhelming, but it all floods out at once then, and then you really feel like you just want everyone to go away and for the world to just switch off for a little bit.
Which is exactly why we need to talk about suicide more, because so many people, it's just about wanting to, a lot of people don't. Me and Hannah talked about this in our episode on suicide. In a lot of cases, people don't want to die. They just don't want to be living at that moment because they're so tired and they just want to switch off.
Yeah.
And I think there's, even in services, there's a big sort of panic, red alert if someone even says the word, when actually it's really normal to have those thoughts when you're feeling that low, and talking about it and normalising the conversation might stop them getting to that point, because if they don't talk about it, or they feel like you're going to send the cavalry round when they even say it, then they won't mention it because they'll feel like there's shame and that it's something that's not okay, and it's actually really normal.
Yeah, I must admit that's something that I always keep to myself. If I feel that bad, I nearly always keep that to myself. But I find it tricky to talk about anyway. I know when I I did mention it before, but it was difficult for me to get the words out. Yes.
Yeah.
The thing about it is, and listening to your podcast and actually talking about it, the thing is, it's about normalizing these things.
Yeah.
It's a word that people don't say.
Yeah.
People don't, when it comes to that word, when it comes to the word suicide, everyone's like, I can't say that word. I don't want to go that far with it.
Yeah.
And I know even when I've been to a doctor and that's how I feel like I feel suicidal, I don't say that. I don't say that word.
No, because you don't want to be sectioned.
Well, no, and well, the thing about, I don't know if it is NHS or doctors that you speak to, but it feels like you really, really have to be on the edge of something to, get anywhere. Like, not that I want to be sectioned. You know what I mean? The thing is, I feel like these people, they obviously know their jobs, but when you go in, what you want is them to drop everything and,
You want to be treated like a human being and know that your problems matter as much as anyone else's. And sometimes it feels like it's a checklist. And if you're not saying you're at immediate risk, then...
It's about learning those things, I think. Again, I suppose it depends on what sort of person you are. I like to know everything about the thing.
Yeah.
Which is why I think I have that decent, extensive sort of horror movie knowledge, because I like to know about the thing.
Yeah.
So I dip into it more. But again, like I say with mental health, I think as soon as I realised that mental health was a thing, not just depression being sad, I dipped into it, and I've looked into it, and I'm a mental health first aider now.
Yeah.
Which is a very tricky thing.
Yeah, I am as well, and the course was fantastic. Hard, but
yeah, it was hard actually. There was a lot of homework.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you learn to be a first aider,
you hope it never happens.
Well, no, not just that, but if you learn to be, I'm a physical first aider as well. But so if someone comes to you with a burn, you know immediately what to do about a burn.
Yeah.
But mental health first aid is very, it's very tricky, and your hands are tied a bit. Or I mean, I don't know what your mental health first aid was like, but your hands are tied a bit in that you can't really do anything, apart from be able to help that person off the ledge, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
right.
point them in the right direction. And I found it difficult while I was doing that course to see what the first aid of it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I must admit, I was saying it in quite a few of the meetings that we had, because I think it was like a 4-day course or something. And I kept coming back to it going, I was like, I'm struggling to see what the first aid is.
Yeah.
But over time, realizing that, that the fact that they teach you all these markers and, what it is you can do to help people, and the fact that to a degree your first aid training can lean into, like I say, noticing things, and I don't know, it's like learning like a duty of care to a degree, I suppose.
Yeah. I was just going to say, you're right with it being difficult to know what to do, because a burn is a burn and you treat it the same way, but no two people experience mental ill health the same way. Even with two people with anxiety will experience that completely differently. So it's so hard to know what to do. I think one of the most important things, and thankfully services are changing towards this, is that it's person-centred. So actually maybe ask the person what they want and involving them in their care planning, which, you wouldn't do that with physical health. You'd be like, how would you treat a broken leg? And be like, I was hoping you'd tell me. But, it is only that person knows what they need in that moment.
Yeah. And it was just about helping guide them in that direction, or at least.
Yeah. Yeah. Because sometimes they're so in it, they wouldn't be able to tell you what they need, even if they know it somewhere in them. So, it's maybe bridging that gap.
Yeah. No, that was a wonderful thing that my work provided.
Yeah, that's great.
Because I'm also a peer listener as well, which all it really means is that I have a telephone number, like a work telephone number. So if anyone has any issues or anything that they want to speak about, then we're available to them.
Yeah.
And that's been really interesting. I think I could do with a refresher of that course, because it's so surprising when you do it, realizing how much you don't listen to people.
Yeah.
You know, getting out of that habit of setting your brain up while someone else is talking.
Yeah, I've been doing it a lot in this interview. I'm sorry, but it's
it's and I do it. I do it during my podcast. If somebody says something, that's probably why I repeat myself a lot on there. Because if somebody says something like, "Oh, I saw this," my brain goes, "Oh, I know a thing I know about that." So I'm like,
it's listening is a real skill. I had so much training on it for my job, and we spoke about how hard it was, particularly with anxiety, because you're so worried about what you're going to say and how you're going to present, and making sure you say the right thing and phrase it the right way, that you then actually haven't, like you said, oh, I wasn't actually listening to what they said. It's hard, really hard.
Yes, it is hard. Yeah, I've found that if I have one of those sessions, though, that I ask them if it's okay if I write stuff down, because while they're talking, if I can write it down, because I say it's all, I'll get rid of it or whatever, and there'll be no names on here and stuff like that. But it just is easier to just do it that way for me, because it just, I don't know why it helps me take that information in. I always think the really interesting thing about that is that when everyone comes with a problem, they know what the answer is. They just want to say it to somebody.
Yeah.
That's really, it amazes me how often during something like that somebody talks themselves through it themselves.
Yeah.
You are literally just there going,
Yeah. 100%.
My favorite question usually for that is, so what would you like the end result to be? And then they're away.
Yeah. I found it interesting when you're talking about like needing to go back to the doctors. I just think it really highlights that people still talk about mental health as in terms of getting better. I just do not believe in that. I think because it makes it sound like a cure. I think it's a recovery journey that's ongoing, and it might, it's different for different people. Some people that will be lifelong. Some people that, that might not be their whole life. But I have a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I feel like I've gone backwards, or I've, taken a real backslide on all these things." And actually, it's just part of your journey. That's just really normal. And everyone, regardless of whether they have mental ill health or not, has ups and downs and good days and bad days, because we're constantly trying to work on ourselves and make sure we're as well as we can be. When we have those bad days, we think we're taking a backslide and something wrong, when actually it might just be part of the process, and that's fine. It's just, I think, if you're in a place where you can manage it, that's the goal, really. So I just, it sounds like you are there, even though like you've had dips and it's really hard, and like you might need more help sometimes than at other times. You're doing all the right things, and you get help when you need it.
It's a lesson learned over a lot of time. But I've also, a little bit of what you're saying is, I've also realised that in all likelihood, this is something I'm going to be dealing with for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And now, but sometimes I think knowing that is enough to know that sometimes the bad days come, basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes the bad days come and you can't, but it's about, I think, managing that, at least the antidepressants don't take away the depression, but they do sometimes soften the blow.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go so extreme. and I've found my way of dealing with it, and I think my my colleagues know when I'm having a bad day because I just don't talk.
Yeah.
My wife's the same. She knows if I'm having a bad day, I just don't talk.
Yeah. Do you have wellness plans and stuff at work?
No, not really. I think the only thing that I can remember coming up recently was actually checking if people are okay. And that's
Yeah.
that's the only, because we have listening peer meetings where we talk about these things, but I think, yeah, I don't really know what it. No, I do know what it is. It's about, like I say, actually checking if people are okay. I don't know what I was listening. Oh, and I was listening to another horror podcast the other day, and it's like they were talking about, once again, like normalizing the mental health thing. That it's like your immediate reaction doesn't have to be "I'm fine."
Yeah.
And we all do that. Absolutely, all of us go, "Yeah, no, I'm fine, thank you."
Mm-hmm.
You know, despite the fact that inside you might be screaming.
Pure fire. I think we talked about it before on the podcast. It's if you say no, it's like panic stations, what's wrong, talk about it. Actually, sometimes I just want to say no, I'm not, but I don't want to talk about it. I think we still need to normalize that.
Yeah. And I found that my best way is to just shut up and not talk about it.
Yeah, that's the trouble. Is that because there's some days you just don't want to talk about it, or because you know people aren't necessarily as receptive to it as you'd like them to be, or is that a combination of both?
It's that, and I also find to a degree I'm quite short temper as well when I'm like that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, me too.
but I don't want to snap at people.
Yeah.
So, like I say, my colleagues recognise it, and I've been lucky that I think over the years they've grown to realise that's what happens, and they don't talk to me if I'm like that. They don't talk to me, and they don't. And I'm it's two fellas actually that I work with, and they don't begrudge me at the next day.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
and they could. You know, they could because they spent the day not talking to anybody.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm a bit. I'd say I was probably a bit of a character at work. I'm always singing at the top of my voice or screaming something. So I think it is a bit of a polar opposite on the days when I'm completely silent. You know, so I know. But like I say, I've been lucky to have been blessed with two fellas that don't hold it against me.
And it's great that they don't, but of course they shouldn't, because you're just experiencing things like a normal human being, and we just don't give ourselves room to experience things. It's like it's like when people try to cheer you up. I had something that upset me the other day, and I just said to, like, people around me are used to it now, but I just said, look, I need to wallow tonight to process it, and then maybe tomorrow I'll be okay. But I need to get through that stage because I can't skip it because I'm not a robot. So yeah, it's okay to have different moods and emotions and feel them and not have to apologize for that or put on the mask. So
weird, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's like you said, you're like, oh God, what good people that I don't have to pretend like that I'm not feeling the way I am. And actually, like, they are, I'm sure, but like that should be like a baseline, right?
Yeah, it should be. But I think I know for a fact that I'm a bit of an arse when I'm like that. So, do you know what I mean? Like, that's the one thing I know is I am a complete arse, you know. So the fact that they don't hold it against me is, you know, because I don't know how regularly I do it. It's probably maybe once a month where I accidentally thought about that time 10 years ago when I vaguely said something to someone, and now I know for a fact that they hate me.
Mhm.
That's made me spiral into a mess of whatever.
No, I can't relate at all. I breeze through life. I don't worry about a thing. Yeah, no, that's just very relatable.
Stuff like this, what you're doing, is what we need. That's it, really. That's how we move forward, though, isn't it? With people sitting down, talking about it honestly. I know I've been rambling on, but I've appreciated it, and I've really appreciated, listening to your podcast. Like Hannah talking about OCD. That was, I was one of the people, even though I like to claim that I know mental health stuff, but I was one of the people that thought OCD was a cleaning thing.
Yeah, no, I used to be as well. It's never feel embarrassed or like apologize for those things, as long as you take the time to learn and continue to grow, because we all have more to learn.
Yeah.
That
was one of the best things I've listened to. That was one of the best things I've heard on a podcast. It gave me so much information, and it was really great. So that's what we need to do, isn't it?
Oh, thank you. That means a lot, and I know that will mean a lot to her as well. But, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. It's
a worthwhile thing.
If you have been affected by any of the topics covered in today's podcast, please see our show notes on our Facebook page for our suggested contacts. If you're interested in talking on our podcast, please get in touch through the Facebook page. We'd love to hear from you. Stay safe, you wonderful people.